Who are the three most important people for a Super Bowl repeat in the Rams organization? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Travis Rogers. You see it right there if you're checking us out on our Locked On Rams YouTube page. You should subscribe to that. You should also make sure that you subscribe to Locked On Rams. Click that little plus, little bookmark, the check, whatever's going on in your podcast feed. Make sure that you check that one, and you will get it every single day. So, want to talk about something that was asked to me. I was a guest on the Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max radio show on ESPN Radio. And they asked a question that I thought would make a pretty good topic for an entire pod. And the question was, what's the most important factor to the Rams running it back? Who are the most important players? Who are the most important things? And what do the Rams need to make sure goes right for them to win back-to-back Super Bowls, or at least give themselves a chance to win back-to-back Super Bowls? And I answered the question, started thinking about it. This is a good chance to kind of put this on the pod. So I'm going to give you three. I'm going to break it down into three different things. We're going to do these according to the level of importance, in my opinion. The most important, the second most important, and then the third most important. So let's just kind of get right into this right now. As far as the most important person to the Rams running it back, I don't know if there's another team in football that could say this. I don't know if there are other good, I don't want to give it away quite yet. There are other guys that fall into this category of important. There are other guys that fall into this category of they are vital and integral to a team's success. But I don't know if any other team would have this person at number one. And I'm talking about the head coach, Sean McVay. Bill Belichick is the greatest head coach in NFL history. Okay. I don't think there's any question about that. He's been to the Super Bowl, 9 times? He's won 6 of them. It's an extraordinary accomplishment. Andy Reid, highly, highly decorated. Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin. There are great coaches in this league that have won Super Bowls, been to multiple Super Bowls. But if you took any of those guys, and not that these guys, but you had a Sean Payton situation where they just had to miss a year, do the prospects of that team go from where they are to less than? Sure. But do they go from you have a Super Bowl caliber team to a I don't know what this is situation like that if the head coach is gone? I don't know if you do. I think with the Rams, you might. Now, it's a little bit different now with Matthew Stafford in the fold, but the reason the Rams are the Rams is because of Sean McVay. Yes, they have extraordinary players. Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, Andrew Whitworth until this season. They have guys that Jalen Ramsey, of course. They've added Bobby Wagner and Allen Robinson, really important players along the way. But we've seen them have good players before. We saw what it looked like in St. Louis. Now, maybe they didn't have that kind of talent. Maybe they didn't have a Matthew Stafford, but they've had players, and the team was always kind of somewhere between bad and barely mediocre. Sean McVay comes in, and boom, it's done right away. Think about what he's done. He has taken 2 teams to the Super Bowl in 5 years. 2 different quarterbacks have been a part of that. We've had a multitude of different running backs in that period of time. The offensive line has been more or less the same up until this season, where you're swapping out 2/5 of that line. But you've had guys going in and out. You've had rookies like Cooper Kupp and then veterans like Cooper Kupp. You've had Robert Woods here. You've had Robert Woods not here. You've had all sorts of different situations of what they have. But the 2 consistent things that have taken place is you've had Aaron Donald and you've had Sean McVay. Aaron Donald is going to the Hall of Fame, but we've seen what Aaron Donald can do on a field where the offense is doing nothing, and he's great, but they weren't good. The team wasn't good. The team wasn't a threat to win the Super Bowl. they have found, and it's not just that he can make Jared Goff look good. It's not just that he can go 1-for-1 with Matthew Stafford. It's not just that he can turn Cooper Kupp into one of the best wide receivers or the best wide receiver in football in a relatively short period of time. All those things are collaborative efforts, right, between himself and the players that we're talking about. So the difference, though, is that when you think about what he does, and I've been lucky enough, and I'll get to see him in person on Saturday. I'm going to go out to Rams training camp July 30th. If you're going out there, make sure you swing on by and say hello. Tell me that you got a chance to check out the pod. It'd make me feel good and make nice to meet people that listen to it. We could talk a little bit about the Rams. But the difference is Sean McVay has this thing. Sean McVay has this charisma or electricity or leadership qualities. Define it however you want, but it is that intangible it factor that you either have or you do not have. And in this particular case, what he has is the ability to get everyone on the same page. It's incredibly difficult. It is an incredibly difficult ask to find a guy to get Aaron Donald. How do you motivate Aaron Donald, who is largely self-motivated, but how do you get him to buy in? He's at the very top of the food chain. Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, at the very top of the food chain. But how do you got to relate to those guys and get them to buy in and get them to understand what it is that your vision is, the we, not me, be at your best when your best is required, all the things that he says. But you also need to connect with the bottom guys. You also need to connect with everybody in between and get them to buy into what you're doing and get them to understand that what you're doing is in their best interest. Get them to understand that if we all do the things that we need to do, collectively, we can go do very special things. It's very easy to say and virtually impossible to do. The best guys are the best. There's a reason that Pete Carroll is terrific at this. There's a reason that Andy Reid and Mike Tomlin and Bill Belichick, and there's not just one way to do it, right? It doesn't have to be through charisma. It doesn't have to be through intimidation. It doesn't have to be through just guys understanding that your ways are going to be successful, and ultimately that's going to get them wins, which gets them paid, which gets them happy, right? It's all of it. If you had a situation where Sean McVay, and by the way, in the world that we are right now, where all of a sudden, health and safety protocols, that means something to all of us right now. It's not unforeseeable where he could be gone for a period of time. It's unlikely, but this is the most important part. We talk about the window, right? Les Snead came on the Travis and Sliwa show on ESPN Radio 710, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Weekdays, and said, you got to know where you are in your window. And Aaron Donald is a large part of that window. Matthew Stafford is a piece of that window. The window is Sean McVay. We talked about it when he flirted with Amazon for half a second. The window is Sean McVay. So as far as repeating or getting back to the Super Bowl or having Sean McVay is the most important person in that room. His passion, his commitment to the team. If any of these things start to wane just a little bit, I think that you'll be able to tell. I think that the results will show themselves on the field. And if he doesn't, if he continues to be the coach that he's been through the first 5 years, the Rams are going to continue to be good. I really believe that he is the most important person inside that organization. So the second most important person in this organization, you could probably guess. He's a decent football player. We'll talk about the defensive side of the ball coming up next. But first, let's talk about Dave, right? It's happened to you. It's happened to me. You run a little short. Your month goes in a direction that maybe you weren't expecting it to go, that you have a trip, car breaks down, something happens with one of the kids. You need to spend some money that you didn't have allocated for that. And all of a sudden you're coming up a little short. You're paycheck to check. You're struggling to make ends meet. It's stressful, right? It's happened to all of us, but maybe you need to borrow a little money. Here's how you can do it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's money to put in your gas tank, which is incredibly expensive right now. To buy a gift for something, to catch up on that bill that's been kind of hanging over your head for a while, tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. No interest, no credit check needed. Here's how you do it. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for the extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees applies. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC, and the future you will thank you. All right, so if Sean McVay is number one on the most important person list as far as the Rams running it back, who is number two on that list? I don't think that this will come as any big surprise. The only question is, does he finish second or does he finish third? And I think it's number 2. Aaron Donald is the second most important person to the Rams' success in a back-to-back pursuit. Here's why. We have seen the Rams win games with somebody that is not the quarterback of your dreams, right? Now, we have seen it, and this is why Sean McVay is number 1. When you had Case Keenum and Jared Goff and Jeff Fisher here, Rams were lousy. And that was because Case Keenum was mediocre and Jared Goff was incredibly green and looked lost. And Jeff Fisher wasn't able to get either of those guys where they needed to be. That's number 1. However, when you look at where the Rams have been the last 5 years under McVay, we're going to the next tier down on this. The reason Aaron Donald is number 2 is they won with Jared Goff. They've won with John Wolford. They won ultimately with Matthew Stafford. They have been able to win games with a variety of levels of competence at the quarterback position. Obviously, the pinnacle with Matthew Stafford last year. And this is incredibly important. Let's start right here. Aaron Donald plays, right? We talk about great players, and I'm not comparing these two guys historically and what they've been able to do, but Cam Akers is a really good player. Cam Akers can't stay on the field. Darrell Henderson is a really good player. He can't stay on the field. We saw Sebastian Joseph Day last year, a really good player for the Rams. He was unable to stay on the field. He had that pec injury. Aaron Donald plays every single week. And the reason that he's number 2 on this list is the one time that we've seen Aaron Donald not be able to play was in the playoffs a couple of years ago against the Green Bay Packers when they were in Lambeau Field. And Jared Goff, despite having his thumb barely attached with some screws, despite it being 500 degrees below zero in Lambeau Field, the Rams offense functioned reasonably well, all things considered. That's when Akers was killing it to give him the ball over and over and over again. The problem was Aaron Donald was hurt. Aaron Donald had an injury, a rib injury, a chest injury, and he just was a shadow of himself. He was a mortal, for lack of. He didn't play a good deal in the second half. And that Rams defense went from something that you could really lean on. You could really lean on and look, we saw it during the NFC Championship game. He gets to Jimmy Garoppolo with the biggest play of the game. When he wasn't able to go, that defense went from something that you could really lean on to something that just really wasn't going to be the reason you won a football game. They got off the field in the Super Bowl because Aaron Donald made 2 huge plays on 3rd down and 4th down. And he turns around, he starts pointing to the ring, right? Well, it's something we'll never forget. But those are plays that regular guys don't make. If Aaron Donald missed a week, you can survive. If Aaron Donald misses a month, now we're talking about a situation where maybe you're not competing for a division championship. I think they'd still be okay in that particular regard. But to win the Super Bowl, and this is what we're talking about, the most important people to give the Rams a chance to run it back, like Sean McVay likes to say, Aaron Donald has, because you can't win. They don't win that game. They don't win the NFC Championship game without Aaron Donald. They don't win the Super Bowl without Aaron Donald. Cooper Kupp, MVP. Matthew Stafford, no-look pass. All of the things that we've talked about a lot. Aaron Donald, go back to the NFL films, right? Go back to the thing that they showed during the game where Sean McVay is standing there. He's got his hands on his knees, and he's getting ready. This is where Aaron Donald makes a play. This is where, greatness comes out. And what happened? Greatness came out. He delivered the signature play of the Super Bowl, or one of the signature plays of the Super Bowl, because everybody, myself and Sean McVay, all 80,000 people in that building, they're like, 99 is going to do something here. This is why we pay him all the money. This is why he's going to the Hall of Fame. This is why he might be the greatest defensive player ever. This is why he's the best football player in the NFL right now, because everybody knows he's got to do something, and he did. That's something that doesn't happen with most, even other great players, right? Everybody knows Tom Brady's going to try to make it, and he does frequently. But defensive player like that, that's why he's on that list. That's why he's number 2 on that list, because if they had to go through the playoffs without Aaron Donald, I don't know if they can get where they want to go. I hope we'd never find out. I hope they never have to try. I hope they never have to figure out, hey, who backs up Aaron Donald? That's a question that nobody wants to ever have to ask themselves. But if they did, I don't know if anybody would like the answer. And I don't know if we're still doing Super Bowl celebration podcasts in the middle of July, getting ready for our training camp, because Aaron Donald was out and somebody else stepped into that void. That is an unfillable void. That's why he's number 2 on the list. All right, let's go to number 3 on the list. Okay. Number 3 on the list, we've had a coach, we've had a defensive player. You could probably guess where we're going next. We're going to the offensive side of the ball. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. Okay, so we've had Sean McVay. We have had Aaron Donald as the two most important people as far as running it back in the Super Bowl. Let's go to the final person on this list, the third person. And again, this all goes back. I was on with Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max on their show on ESPN Radio this morning, and they were asking me questions about the Rams. And one of the questions they asked was, hey, who's the most important person for the Rams running it back? Or what's the biggest obstacle? And I started thinking, okay, well, there's a couple of different options here. The third option, I think, and we're doing these in order, McVay, Donald, and the last one here, and it's not because it's unimportant, it's just not quite as important as the other two, is Matthew Stafford. Kind of put everything together that we've talked about the last two segments, and I think this is pretty obvious why this one is coming in third. Sean McVay took Jared Goff to the Super Bowl. Sean McVay won a bunch of games with Jared Goff. Sean McVay never had a losing season with Jared Goff. Jared Goff is, on his very best day, okay. On his very best day, that's okay. We can work with that. He didn't have a lot of very best days. He had a lot of, like most of us, he had a lot of average days, and his average was exactly that. It was average. And McVay found a way to squeeze a little bit extra out of that. Sean McVay also knows that he's got Aaron Donald on the other side, so we don't have to try some crazy things because that's going to happen. This is where Matthew Stafford comes in. He knows that he can open up everything to him. He knows that he can trust him, that they can have an open dialogue on what will and what won't work. I always think about this. Speaking of Keyshawn Johnson, friend of mine, has said this a bunch of times. Eric Davis, who I did the pregame show with a bunch of times. Kirk Morrison has said this to me a bunch of times. DeMarco Farr and Marcellus Wiley, all my NFL friends have said this, that you need to be able to tell the coach, hey, that's not going to work. Right? That is something that is just not going to work. You can, I'm just telling you right now, I'm out there running the routes. I'm out there playing the defense. This will not work. And if you can have some open communication between the coach and the quarterback in that regard, it's incredibly valuable. You can say, hey, listen, I understand what you're trying to do here, but the way I'm seeing it, no, instead of doing A, we need to do B. We need to do a lot more of B, C, D, and E and less of A. And if the quarterback and the head coach have a relationship where they trust each other, where they've had success together, where he's been in the league a long time and proven that he can do the things that he's asking to do, we can go do it. And that's exactly what happened with Stafford and Sean McVay last year. That trust that usually takes a while to build was almost instantaneous between those two guys for all of the obvious reasons. Sean McVay is operating on a level that's a 10 out of 10. Matthew Stafford was finally around somebody who was doing that and went from an organization in Detroit that was, do I need to tell you what that is? Not good. How about that? To be generous with it, to an organization that's fully functional and competent and understands it. And he's got 10 plus years in the league. He comes in and says, look, I know what works and what doesn't. Let's put these two things together. And McVay didn't have to think about, well, I can't have him do this because he doesn't understand that if that's not there, it's got to go over here. Just, okay, here are your options. Go execute it. And he did. And they don't win that Super Bowl without him. I know Cooper Kupp was the MVP. I know Aaron Donald made the two big plays. But with the exception of the Arizona Cardinal game in the wild card. And we'll talk about Kyler Murray tomorrow, by the way, and his little desire to get a incentivization for like a video game program or whatever. I don't know. We'll talk about him another day. But what we're talking about right here is somebody that they don't win the Super Bowl if Matthew Stafford isn't there. The plays he made at the end of the Tampa game in the divisional round, not a lot of guys make those plays. The plays he made against San Francisco at SoFi Stadium in the NFC Championship game, they don't win that game if he's not great. They also don't win that game if they don't get a little lucky. Looking at you, Jaquaski Tart. And they sure as you know what don't win the Super Bowl if he doesn't throw some 10 out of 10 balls on that final drive where they scored that touchdown. Cooper Kupp on the fade into the right side of SoFi. It doesn't happen like that, right? It does not happen like that if that's not the way that this is going. And Matthew Stafford is the guy that made those throws, and that's why it's McVay number 1, that's why it's Aaron Donald number 2, and that's why it's Matthew Stafford number 3. We can kind of go through it on layers from there. There's a lot of other guys that are very important to the success of this team, whether or not they go back or not. But if any of those pieces are missing or even miss portions of the season, and certainly if any of that happens in the postseason, the Rams have a very uphill climb. All right, we will talk about Kyler Murray tomorrow. We'll get into that for sure. Thank you very much for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now make your second listen, the Locked On NFL podcast, our national NFL experts and insiders keeping you dialed in with the biggest stories and news from around the league, because an offseason does not equal a break in the action. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.